Welcome to this technique lesson on stakeholder analysis. This is a deep dive how-to video where I explain in quite a lot of detail the different stakeholder analysis techniques that you can use as a business analyst on a project. So get ready, sit back, get a notepad, and let's jump in. So first of all, what is stakeholder analysis? So this is the process of identifying all individuals or groups who have a vested interest in the project, understanding their expectations and influence, and then developing strategies for effective communication and engagement to ensure the successful execution and completion of a project. So if you have experience working within projects, you would have had some involvement at least around stakeholder analysis. The whole project is all about all the different stakeholder groups that needs to be engaged at different levels and for different purposes. From a business analysis perspective, we have a very big interest in terms of engaging all the right groups around their business needs and requirements. But stakeholder analysis and the work that you might be doing around stakeholder analysis can be used by the wider project, and very often it's also used by change management. But let's have a look at some of the specific techniques that you can apply and should apply as part of your business analysis, stakeholder analysis work. So when you start your work as a stakeholder doing some stakeholder analysis, these are the 4 things that you will start by looking at. And then you only start looking at modeling these with specific techniques. So one of the key things is you need to understand who are all the different roles and what are their key responsibilities that will be impacted and relevant to the work that you'll do as a BA on your project. It's very useful to understand people's attitudes in terms of the project that you do, so that you know how to engage those individuals and what level of engagement would be required. How much decision-making authority does a particular stakeholder or stakeholder group have? And that will actually impact how you engage with that stakeholder, how much information they would be receiving, and how often you would be talking to them. And this also becomes really important when you have to get approval for some of the work that you deliver. So it's also important for a business analyst to understand the level of power or influence of a particular stakeholder. Because if they've got a lot of power over your initiative success, it is important for you to build a strong relationship with them so that they can trust you to know that you will do your absolute best to deliver the best results for their initiative. So make sure to identify them. So now let's talk about a particular technique that you can use to get this information out there in a visual way. Right, so now let's have a quick look at the stakeholder matrix. So this diagram comes from the Babok guide, and it is a very effective and yet a very simple way of showing exactly who are your stakeholders, how much influence do they have, and how heavily are they impacted by what you're doing. And essentially, you'll be plotting them on this matrix. So let's have a really quick look at how it works. So essentially, you'll determine if a stakeholder group is heavily impacted by your initiative. Let's say you're implementing a new call center software solution, and your stakeholder group is the call center staff. They are very much impacted, so they will be sitting within this quadrant. They don't have that much influence about the change as such, so that's why they will not be sitting in this particular quadrant. So you'll keep them informed. They will be very concerned about their roles or how things might change for them. So it's important that you look after them as a group and make sure that you keep them close in terms of the changes that's coming up. However, their manager, their department head of the call center, or potentially the technology manager looking after the call center, his team is heavily impacted, but he also has a lot of influence being a senior stakeholder within the organization. And therefore, you need to make sure that you work closely with him and his delegates to make sure that they're in agreement with how you propose to make the changes. But then you might also have a legal team that doesn't actually need to, they are not impacted directly by the change at all. They simply have to provide some legal advice around some of the call center scripts. Therefore, they will, for example, sit within the low quadrant because they are not really impacted very much. The influence isn't that big in this instance because they are just focusing on a small part of the project. And this is what you'll do for every stakeholder group. You'll decide exactly how heavily are they impacted and how much influence do they have. So with influence, it is all about, can they potentially impact the success of your project? If you need to work out whether they are somebody that needs to sit high on the list or lower on the list. So if you want to go give this a go on your own and see how you go, here is a scenario for you to consider. So imagine you are working on a patient records management system initiative in a hospital. You've got these different stakeholders, so patient records personnel, nurses, patients, medical authority, pharmacies, and the head of patient records, the sponsor. Maybe just go spend a few minutes and see where you would plot them on this particular matrix. Remember to make a few assumptions when you decide where to put someone on the list, because that often affects where they have to be plotted on the matrix. So go and enjoy that exercise on your own. But now let's jump into the next diagram, the Stakeholder Onion diagram. So again, this is sourced from the Babel Guide, so you'll find even more information there. However, basically what this diagram is helping us with is to help us think about who are all the different stakeholder groups that are impacted in some way or have some interest in the initiative that we're working on. This is great to use when you're in the stage of identifying all the different stakeholders. So it helps you think about, okay, solution delivery, our immediate team, who are they? Then we look at the affected organizational unit. So if we, like in our previous example, are implementing a new call center solution, this will be the call center. They will definitely be a close-knitted stakeholder group. Then we think about the wider organization. Who else do we need to include with this change? And then finally, we look at our outside. So who are our external stakeholders that will also have an interest in what we're doing? And we need to identify them so that we can make sure that we communicate with them in the appropriate way. So this is just a nice quick diagram that you can use to illustrate perhaps all the different groups when you do your analysis. And then the last technique, which I won't delve into too much detail because I'm sure you've used this before, but nevertheless, it's important for us to review it. So the RACI Matrix is all about identifying all of your stakeholders. So here you can list all of the different stakeholders and stakeholder groups that's part of your initiative. And then you determine, will they be responsible for work? Will they be accountable for anything? Will they be consulted or will they be informed? Now, as you can imagine, with the RACI Matrix, you can apply this coming from different perspectives. So as a business analyst, when you come from the perspective of refining requirements, eliciting requirements, getting requirements reviewed and approved, you can create your own RACI Matrix from that particular perspective. And then you can determine, so who's responsible to be part of all the elicitation workshops? These might be dedicated subject matter experts that's been assigned to your project to work with you. Who's accountable for delivering certain artifacts relating to your workshops? Who do I need to consult as a business analyst regarding the requirements? And who do I need to keep informed? So that's just one other way that you can apply the RACI Matrix for your particular business analysis purposes. Great. So what do you need to think about when you start planning your stakeholder engagement? So you've done some identification, you've done the onion diagram, you've done the stakeholder matrix where you plotted the impact and the influence. And you've also got a RACI matrix where you've worked out exactly at what level do you need to work with each of these individuals and what would their roles and responsibilities be in terms of the project or specifically the business analysis activities. But now you also need to think, okay, where are these people based? How often should I communicate with them? What tools would be the most appropriate ways to communicate with different groups? So as you can imagine, someone that perhaps works remotely, you would have to use remote tools. So, for example, you might have to have one-on-one conversations with them, invite them to virtual workshops, and use tools to support that. However, for certain types of stakeholders, you may need to have that one-on-one relationship, where with others, it might be efficient or sufficient to just keep them informed via email. So these are important considerations. You don't want to send somebody just emails if it is really more appropriate that you talk to them directly. So make sure that you have a really good strategy for engaging all the different types of stakeholders so that you can get the most out of all the elicitation that you have to do. And think about their preferences. As far as you can, work with them in order to make sure that you get the most out of them for the purposes of getting business analysis work done to the best possible standard. So why would you even do a stakeholder analysis? So I think by now you probably know that this is so that you don't miss any important stakeholders. It's really important for you to identify especially all those people with high influence, or those groups with high influence, but also those groups that's impacted quite severely. Because if you miss a group that's being impacted, it can really cause a lot of problems for your project down the line. And of course, it helps you to make sure that you've got all the right people in the room and that you're talking to all the right stakeholders. And it also, like I say, it will help you to identify the impacted parties appropriately. If you made it this far in the video, I just want to say congratulations. It was a deep dive in the technique of stakeholder analysis. So well done for doing that. If you enjoyed this lesson and you would like to learn more about business analysis and business analysis techniques, please consider subscribing or liking the video. I look forward to seeing you in the next video.